My fiancée said, "You're too immature for this," ending our 3-year engagement. 2 weeks later, her twin sister whispered, "I've loved you since we met," and slipped a ring on my finger. I'm Danny, 29, and I've spent the last 6 years studying marine ecosystems at the City Aquarium's research facility. I met Sophia at a science museum fundraiser 3 years ago where I was presenting our coral reef restoration project. She was this stunning corporate event coordinator who seemed genuinely fascinated when I explained how we were rebuilding damaged reefs using innovative calcium carbonate structures. "You're so passionate about this," she said, her eyes lighting up as I showed her microscopic photos of coral polyps regenerating. "It's like watching cities rebuild themselves underwater." That night, she stayed until the museum closed, asking detailed questions about ocean acidification and marine biodiversity. I thought I'd found someone who appreciated the work that consumed my life. For the first few months, Sophia encouraged my research, even joining me for weekend scuba expeditions to collect water samples. She'd surface with this amazed expression, salt water dripping from her mask, saying things like, "I never realized how complex these ecosystems are." But something shifted around month 6. The enthusiastic questions became subtle suggestions for improvement. "You know, babe, maybe you could explain the science without using so many technical terms. People connect better with accessible language." She started reshaping my wardrobe, replacing my comfortable field clothes with expensive suits that made me feel like I was wearing a costume. "Presentation matters in your field," she insisted, donating my favorite marine biology conference t-shirts to charity while I was at work. My weekend diving trips became unprofessional weekend activities that don't align with your career goals. She convinced me to sell my vintage motorcycle, the one I'd restored myself and used for quick trips to coastal research sites. "Successful men drive cars, not toys," she explained while browsing luxury sedan brochures. My monthly documentary nights where research colleagues gathered to discuss new marine discoveries were dismissed as juvenile movie marathons that make you look unserious. She systematically eliminated these gatherings by scheduling dinner parties with her corporate friends on the same nights. The volunteer work I did teaching kids about marine conservation at the local schools was reframed as playing with children instead of networking with professionals who could advance your career. Even my weekly tide pool explorations, where I documented seasonal changes in local marine populations, were labeled as playing in the sand when you should be building professional relationships. I started rationalizing her controlling behavior as helping me become more refined, more worthy of her sophisticated world. She had this way of making her demands sound like loving guidance. "I'm just trying to help you reach your potential," she'd say whenever I expressed hesitation about abandoning another aspect of my authentic self. Successful couples support each other's growth. What I didn't realize was that while I was losing pieces of myself to fit her vision, Sophia was secretly planning our entire wedding at venues I'd never seen, with caterers specializing in cuisine I couldn't afford, creating a celebration of the man she was trying to force me to become rather than the person she'd originally claimed to love. Sophia's transformation of my life accelerated with surgical precision over the following months. I came home one evening to find my cozy beachfront apartment completely gutted and redesigned into what she called a sophisticated living space worthy of our future. My beloved aquarium collection, 15 tanks housing everything from rare seahorses to juvenile octopi that I'd been studying for behavioral research, had been donated to the local high school while I was at work. They were cluttering the space and making it look like a pet store, she explained matter-of-factly, replacing my comfortable furniture with stark modern pieces that felt cold and unwelcoming. My marine photography collection, years of underwater shots documenting coral regeneration and fish behavior patterns, disappeared from the walls, replaced by expensive abstract art that meant nothing to me. She enrolled me in wine appreciation courses every Thursday night, forcing me to miss the research team's weekly data analysis sessions where we discussed breakthrough discoveries. "Cultured men understand fine wine," she insisted, despite knowing I preferred simple beer after long days in saltwater. The business networking seminars she signed me up for were torture sessions where I struggled to connect with people who spoke only about profit margins and market expansion while my mind wandered to the coral spawning season I was missing. Sophia began publicly dismissing my family whenever they came up in conversation with her corporate friends. My father's fishing charter business, which had operated successfully for 30 years and taught me everything about ocean currents and marine behavior, became a quaint little boat operation in her descriptions. My mother's work as a marine park educator, inspiring thousands of children to care about ocean conservation, was reduced to playing with dolphins for tourists. "Your parents are sweet," she'd tell her colleagues, but Danny's really elevated himself beyond that kind of work. The manipulation reached its peak when Sophia presented me with what she called our improvement plan during a dinner at an expensive restaurant I couldn't afford. She'd created a detailed timeline requiring me to immediately apply for MBA programs, abandon my weekend tide pool exploration research that was contributing to climate change studies, and stop participating in the monthly beach cleanup initiatives I'd organized for 3 years. "Successful couples focus on advancement, not playing in the sand," she explained, sliding the typed document across the table like a contract. "These hobby activities are holding you back from reaching your potential." She began monitoring my social media presence with obsessive attention, deleting posts about research discoveries and replacing them with staged photos of expensive dinners and luxury vacation spots we couldn't afford. When I published a paper on microplastic impact in local marine ecosystems, she made me take down the celebratory post because it makes you look like an environmental extremist instead of a serious professional. Most devastating was when she started intercepting phone calls from my diving buddies and research partners, claiming they were holding you back from reaching your potential and needed to be eliminated from my life. The breaking point came at Sophia's company's annual gala at the Oceanview Resort, an upscale event where she'd insisted I wear a $1,000 tuxedo that made me feel like a fraud. I was standing awkwardly by the silent auction tables when Dr. Margaret Chin, a marine conservation donor, approached me after recognizing my name from a recent publication. "You're the researcher working on sea turtle rehabilitation, aren't you?" she asked with genuine interest. For the first time in months, I felt myself come alive as I described our breakthrough technique for treating shell fractures using biocompatible polymers. "We've had an 87% success rate," I explained enthusiastically, my voice gaining strength as I talked about something that actually mattered. "Last month, we released 12 juveniles back into the wild after they'd been given up for dead." Dr. Chen's eyes lit up, and within minutes, a small crowd had gathered around us. I found myself describing the intricate process of rehabilitating injured sea turtles, how we developed new surgical techniques and created specialized recovery habitats that mimicked natural ocean conditions. "The most rewarding part is watching them swim away," I said, my hands moving as I painted the picture. "You can actually see their instincts kick in when they hit open water." The group was captivated, asking detailed questions about our success rates and expansion plans. I felt genuinely useful for the first time in months, discussing research that could save entire species rather than pretending to care about market portfolios and wine vintages. That's when I noticed Sophia watching from across the room, her face twisted with something that looked like horror and disgust. She pushed through the crowd and grabbed my arm with enough force to leave marks. "Danny, we need to check on the silent auction," she said through clenched teeth, practically dragging me away from the conversation. Dr. Chin called after us, saying she'd love to discuss potential funding opportunities, but Sophia kept walking. "Your childish excitement about fish is humiliating me in front of important clients," she hissed once we were alone. "These people are here to network about serious business, not listen to you babble about playing with sea creatures like some kind of overgrown child." The drive home was a nightmare of cold silence until Sophia finally exploded with the cruelest words I'd ever heard from someone who claimed to love me. "You're too immature for this, Danny. Real men build empires. They don't play with sea creatures like children while their wives carry the burden of actually advancing in life." She pulled into our driveway and turned to face me with eyes full of contempt. "I've arranged a position for you at Coastal Petroleum Consulting. They're expecting your resume Monday morning. You'll abandon this ridiculous research career, cut all ties with your loser diving friends, and allow me to manage every aspect of your professional image." Her ultimatum was delivered with the precision of a business contract. "Or our 3-year engagement ends tonight. Choose." Sitting in that car, Looking at the woman I'd planned to marry, I realized with crushing clarity that she had never loved me at all. She'd fallen in love with an idea of who I could become if I completely erased everything that made me who I was. The marine biologist who got excited about saving sea turtles wasn't the man she wanted. She wanted a petroleum consultant who wore expensive suits and talked about profit margins instead of coral reefs. 2 weeks after I ended our engagement by choosing my integrity over her ultimatum, I was cataloging new specimens in the research center's lab when Maya appeared in the doorway with trembling hands and tears streaming down her face. Sophia's identical twin sister looked exactly like her physically, but everything else about her was different. She wore faded jeans and a marine conservation t-shirt instead of designer clothes, and her eyes held genuine warmth rather than calculating coldness. "Danny, I need to tell you something I should have said 3 years ago," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I've been in love with you since the night we met at that museum fundraiser." The confession hit me like a tidal wave, but Maya wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers and showed me screenshot after screenshot of text messages that made my stomach drop. "Sophia's been dating Richard Morrison, that oil executive from her networking group, for 8 months, she said, her voice barely audible. "She's been using you as her backup plan while waiting for him to propose." The messages were devastating in their casual cruelty. Sophia had written things like, "Danny's such a reliable safety net," and "keeping the boring one interested while I wait for the real prize to make his move." There were photos of expensive dinners with Richard, vacation pictures from trips she'd claimed were work conferences, and worst of all, screenshots of the massive diamond engagement ring Richard had given her just 5 days after our breakup. "She called you her practice husband," Maya said, tears falling onto her phone screen. "Said you were good for learning what she didn't want in a real relationship." The most heartbreaking revelation came when Maya showed me months of her own text messages trying to warn me about Sophia's behavior. "I kept trying to tell you she was manipulating you," she explained, "but every time I brought up concerns, she'd convince me you were too weak to handle the truth anyway, and that I was just jealous of what you two had." Maya had documented everything. Sophia's lies about working late when she was actually with Richard, the fake phone calls where she pretended to be handling wedding vendors while actually planning a different life with someone else, and the systematic campaign to isolate me from friends and family who might expose her deception. "I wanted to protect you, but I also didn't want to destroy my relationship with my sister," Maya said, her voice filled with regret. "I thought maybe she really loved you and would change. I was wrong." The evidence was overwhelming and nauseating. Sophia had never seen me as a person worth loving. I was just a convenient placeholder until something better came along. She'd spent 3 years methodically destroying my confidence and authentic self while secretly building a completely different future with a man who could provide the lifestyle she actually wanted. "Richard proposed last week," Maya continued, "but not before making it clear that he expects her to be a traditional trophy wife who gives up her career entirely. She's discovering that the wealthy lifestyle she wanted comes with its own prison bars." 6 months after that devastating conversation with Maya, I was finally starting to feel like myself again when she sent me a simple text message that changed everything. "The whale migration is starting. Want to photograph it together?" Unlike her manipulative sister, Maya was a freelance marine photographer who had been documenting ocean conservation efforts for environmental magazines, and she'd been secretly following my research publications for years. Our first underwater photography session became an 8-hour adventure that reminded me what genuine connection felt like. Maya moved through the water with the grace of someone who belonged there, her camera capturing images that told stories about marine life rather than just documenting specimens. When we surfaced after discovering a rare nudibranch species I'd never seen in local waters, her excitement was absolutely infectious. "Did you see the way it was feeding?" she gasped, treading water beside me with her eyes bright with wonder. The tentacle movements were completely different from what's documented in the literature. We spent the next hour floating on the surface, comparing her photographs with my field notes, realizing we'd been working on complementary aspects of the same coral reef restoration project without knowing it. Maya revealed she'd been documenting the visual recovery of reef sections where my team had installed new calcium carbonate structures, creating a photographic timeline that perfectly matched my scientific data. "Your research is saving these ecosystems," she said as we examined her images on the boat ride back. "I've been watching the same coral heads regenerate for 18 months, and the transformation is incredible." Everything Sophia had called immature and unprofessional, Maya celebrated with genuine enthusiasm. She joined my monthly beach cleanup initiatives wearing vintage band t-shirts and bringing homemade sandwiches to share with volunteers. During our weekend tide pool explorations, she'd spend hours helping me document seasonal changes, her artistic eye capturing details that enhanced my scientific observations. Our evening documentary sessions became collaborative affairs where Maya would share footage from her underwater assignments while I explained the research implications of what she'd filmed. "You should see your face when you talk about your work," she told me one night after we'd spent 3 hours discussing the impact of ocean acidification on shell formation. "You light up like you're sharing the most important secret in the world." Sophia was insane to think that passion was something to be ashamed of. As our friendship deepened into something more profound, I realized I'd found someone who didn't just tolerate my dedication to marine conservation but actively amplified it. Maya understood that my excitement about saving sea turtles represented depth and purpose, not childishness. She saw my weekend diving expeditions as essential research rather than unprofessional hobbies. When I published a new paper on microplastic filtration techniques, Maya surprised me by creating a stunning photo essay that made the research accessible to general audiences, helping secure additional funding for our department. "This is what partnership looks like," she said as we reviewed the final layout together. "Two people making each other better at what they love instead of trying to change each other into someone completely different." Meanwhile, Sophia's carefully constructed world was collapsing in spectacular fashion. Richard discovered she'd been lying about virtually everything, her family background, her education credentials, even her age, to appear more sophisticated and worthy of his social circle. When he found out she'd claimed to have a master's degree from an Ivy League school instead of her actual community college certificate, he ended their engagement via a cold email that Maya showed me. "I cannot build a future with someone who fundamentally misrepresents herself," he'd written. "Please return the ring via my attorney." While Sophia's relationship imploded, Maya and I were collaborating on a marine conservation documentary that combined her artistic vision with my scientific expertise in ways that created something genuinely beautiful. Maya's underwater cinematography captured the delicate process of coral regeneration in stunning detail, while my research provided the scientific framework that gave meaning to every image. We spent weekends working side by side, her editing footage while I wrote narration that translated complex ecological concepts into accessible language. The contrast between my two relationships became undeniable when Maya surprised me with a collection of vintage diving equipment she'd found at an estate sale, gear from the 1970s that would enhance my historical research into local marine ecosystems. She'd spent hours researching what I needed and invested her own money into supporting my work, celebrating the very interests Sophia had tried to destroy. Our Saturday mornings were spent rehabilitating injured sea turtles at the Marine Center, with Maya documenting their recovery process while I performed medical treatments. "You're literally saving lives," she'd say as I carefully cleaned infected wounds or adjusted feeding tubes. "How could anyone think this work is childish?" When Sophia discovered through mutual friends that her twin sister was dating her former fiancé, she launched a vindictive campaign that revealed the true depths of her narcissistic personality. She showed up at Maya's photography studio screaming about betrayal and family loyalty, demanding to know how Maya could steal her happiness after she'd invested 3 years in training Danny to be worthy of a real relationship. Maya calmly recorded the entire confrontation on her phone while Sophia destroyed thousands of dollars worth of photography equipment in her rage. The harassment escalated to social media manipulation, where Sophia posted carefully edited photos and fake screenshots claiming Maya had been secretly pursuing me throughout our entire engagement. She created elaborate lies about Maya sabotaging our relationship from the beginning, even though the evidence of her own infidelity was overwhelming and easily documented. Most viciously, Sophia contacted my research department with fabricated accusations about unprofessional conduct, claiming I'd been embezzling grant money and conducting unauthorized experiments. The investigation lasted 2 weeks before my supervisor dismissed every allegation as obviously false, but not before Sophia had tried to destroy my reputation and career out of pure spite. 2 years after Maya and I began building something real together, I proposed during a sunset dive at our favorite coral reef, the same site where we'd first discovered that rare nudibranch species. I'd worked with a marine equipment manufacturer to create a waterproof container that opened like a shell, revealing the ring surrounded by bioluminescent plankton that glowed softly in the underwater twilight. When Maya surfaced and removed her regulator, her tears mixed with salt water as she whispered, "Yes," before I could even ask the question properly. Our wedding took place on Pelican Beach, the same stretch of coastline where we'd conducted our first tide pool exploration together. The ceremony was designed around our shared values of environmental stewardship and authentic connection rather than expensive displays of wealth. Maya wore her grandmother's simple dress instead of a designer gown, and I chose a linen suit that felt comfortable instead of constraining. Our guests included my research colleagues, Maya's photography clients, and 36 children from the marine education programs we developed together. The most meaningful moment came when we released 12 rehabilitated sea turtles into the ocean as living symbols of our commitment to protecting what we loved. As each turtle disappeared into the waves, our guests cheered, understanding that this ceremony celebrated not just our love but our shared purpose. Sophia attempted to crash the wedding by arriving with a hired photographer, claiming she wanted to document the disaster for social media. She appeared at the beach perimeter shouting about how I'd never be successful playing with fish and how Maya had stolen her life. My diving buddies, now close friends who'd become like family, formed a protective barrier while wedding guests watched in embarrassed silence as security escorted her away. The woman who'd once controlled every aspect of my appearance and behavior had been reduced to a ranting stranger whose opinion no longer held any power over my happiness. 5 years later, Maya and I have established the Deep Blue Conservation Foundation, a nonprofit that combines marine research with underwater photography to educate communities about ocean protection. Our work has contributed to the establishment of 3 new marine sanctuaries and influenced policy changes that protect critical coastal habitats. Maya's photographs of coral restoration appear in textbooks and museums worldwide, while my research on climate-resistant reef structures has been adopted by conservation projects across the Pacific. We've built the life Sophia claimed was impossible, one where passion for meaningful work creates both personal fulfillment and professional success. The irony isn't lost on me that Sophia remains trapped in a cycle of failed relationships with wealthy men who eventually abandon her for being exhausting and inauthentic. According to mutual friends, she's burned through 5 engagements in 3 years, each one ending when her partners discover the gap between her carefully constructed image and her genuine character. Meanwhile, Maya and I wake up every morning excited about the work we're doing together, whether it's documenting new species discoveries or teaching children that protecting our oceans is the most important adventure they'll ever undertake.